It's a reunion of Dr. Hart and the Rogue Lawyer. We worked together years ago and cannabis a little bit, and
now we're back.
Fucking happy to have you. Happy to be able to chat with you again. So thanks for the invite, man.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to chat with you. I definitely wanted to chat with you about the election results. I think that there's a lot of people who are wondering now, why this happened, why, the election results went the way they did, and, what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
And,
why? That's a fucking big question. If we had the answers definitively, that'd be huge. But there's a lot of people who are wondering, I think, how could you blow such a big lead?
Yeah.
When after the disaster that Trudeau said, and I was a liberal in the past, so it's not like I have an axe to grind. But how Canada doesn't seem to be adjusting to where we need to go to return to meritocracy. That's what disappoints me the most.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, what does have to happen for people to make the adjustment? Like, there's just been so many disasters that have happened over the last 8 to 9 years,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's housing, whether it's just the economy in general, whether it's, some of this like mass immigration that, has affected a lot of people in Canada working. Like, it's like, what actually has to happen for people to want to make this change? And I don't really know how much worse it can get before people are gonna decide that there's got to be some kind of change that happens in the future. It seems like it's insane.
Like, what I'm struggling with a little bit is I think we all think we know what we're talking about, but I've made a concerted effort to try to get into more critical analysis by knowing the other side, digging in. I was very against Trump at the beginning because I thought character-wise. But the evidence, good evidence of a top performer is the ability to change your opinion based on new evidence. And
Agreed.
I think that's true in medicine as much as it is in life. But sometimes I feel like I'm moving farther away from the majority of people who aren't interested in critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost becomes lonelier. You know what I mean? The more you kind of understand that the world really isn't making sense. And it looks like to me that the people are being distracted with the breads and circuses of the old Roman days, before Rome collapsed. Just keep the people occupied with things that don't really matter, like trans issues, or make them think that the environment is catastrophic. And so everybody is arguing over these things, but nobody is actually watching where money is going, what's happening to our institutions. And it almost seems impossible to get people to pay attention. So your question of how do we get people to pay attention is difficult because the digital world gives so many distractions to people, and it reinforces what they already believe, that you can't kind of change people's opinion.
Yeah. And then I think too, there's a difference too between the baby boomers who are still, paying attention to the news, and that's basically the only media they get. Mm-hmm. And certainly a lot of people are blaming them for the election results. And I think that if you look at the polls and you look at the results, there is some, validity to that. But at the same time, it's not like it's just them. It's not like it was just the baby boomers who voted for the liberals. So when you look at the digital age and the social media, I think it's those issues you were talking about, the trans issues and some things like that that are distracting people. So I think that you have, the baby boomers who are, still unwilling to listen to anything besides mainstream media. And we know that, CBC is heavily funded by the liberal government. So that's a massive issue there. And then, I think that there's this, sort of psyop going on with, the younger generations where they're just distracted by basically all this bullshit.
Yeah, you'd think they'd be upset they can't buy a house.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the main thing. When you're, in your mid to late 20s or 30s, that's what you want to do is that's always kind of been the goal is to get a house, build a family, this kind of thing. And that's just being thrown to the wayside. People aren't even discussing that as a main topic, which is insane. Obviously, the conservatives and a lot of people are, discussing it quite a bit, but I do think that you are correct in that it's basically been this psyop of people pretending that there's, more important issues than, things like housing, which are just critically important, not only just for like, the ability to actually live in a house and own something and own property, but just that you can actually have some like, adjustment in your overall, even like well-being. Like that gives you like a massive, like, sense of satisfaction when you can actually purchase your own house.
It
feels
adults
like
you.
Yeah, exactly.
You move out of your parents' house.
Yeah. And I mean, I think now too, there's a massive crisis. And like, they talk about it with men a lot. And I think it is affecting men more, but, women too, I think, are affected by this. And it's odd that it's just not, been more of a issue for people like in that particular age group. And, it's very surprising that age group wasn't, even more conservative. I know that, compared to say like the baby boomers, they probably were. I mean, and I don't know the exact numbers overall, but still, like we do know that a lot of people in that age group did vote liberal.
I think I have an answer for that. Like there's a malaise that's come across young men. They don't feel empowered. They don't feel like there's a lot of opportunity. When I was up in my old army base, Petawawa, I had my son there and I showed him the first house we bought. And he's like, how old were you? I'm like, I think I had just turned 27. He goes, you could buy a house at 27 in the army? Like, you weren't a rich person? I'm like, yeah. He goes, Dad, like nobody even thinks that's possible in my friends. And it's a change that's happened gradually and nobody seems to be talking about it. But I think the reason why, and this is why I'm very critical of Pierre's team, even though I wanted him to win, is, and this is where the help, because I have a marketing and branding company as well, what a lot of people do is they engage in a lot of activity on the social media thing. And so Pierre was putting out lots of activity, but it was only going to the people who are already going to vote for him because housing is a big issue. But how do you get it in front of a young man's attention span? Because people under 30 or 35 aren't generally following political accounts on Instagram. So you're making lots of activity. You're getting likes from all of your party members. And the agency you're paying is saying, see, look how amazing we are. But you're having no impact, lots of activity. And that's why I was super pissed that he didn't get on more long form podcasts, because that's where these men or these younger people are who are disaffected and need to be motivated to vote. And we saw south of the border that Trump knew the media was against him. So he's like, I'm not going to play your media game. I'm just going on Theo Von, Patrick Bet-David, Rogan, all these things. That's how you get them motivated to say, look, you guys don't have houses. Your dads and parents could buy them. You should be pissed. Stop being distracted by nonsense, right? And I just think it's one of the greatest chokes of all time is what happened with Pierre. And it's very disappointing. It's going to hurt the young people.
I saw Patrick Bet-David call him out. Yeah. And I know for sure he got invited on his podcast because he said
was,
that.
And on Theo Von. He was invited on Theo Von.
Wow. I didn't know he was invited on Theo. And that would have made a massive difference.
Oh my God. When you see JD Vance on Theo Von, he's like, it humanized it. Like 2 hours of uninterrupted conversation in front of millions of people. That's $1 billion of ad spend that you wasted. But his advisors, much like Kamala's advisors, didn't like everything about Rogan. Mm-hmm. And he should have gone on Rogan. They should have played the clip of him eating an apple with the reporter, and Rogan should have tossed him an apple, and he should have said, and just leaned into it and said, hey, look, Trump is attacking Trudeau's Canada, not the real Canada. And when we win, Trump won't attack Canada anymore because we're going to be a great party who protects the border, who cares about immigration. Like, it was just such a weak moment. And from the military, like if you don't have the stones to go on Rogan and risk having people criticize you, like how can you lead the country? It seems like he was pretending to be a little bit of a new age politician, but in the end fell back to mainstream media. And
yeah, I think you brought up JD Vance and everyone loves him. And when Trump picked him, I didn't even know who he was, but as soon as he went on Rogan, I loved him. I thought this guy is he's a guy's guy. He's just normal. He
comes from a poor family.
And he's not afraid, obviously, going on Rogan and that kind of thing. And I think that Pierre, as much as I did want him to win, he may have just been still a little bit too polished until, he still had that
No, he had handlers giving him contact lenses and Botox. And it's get out there and create controversy. People pay attention to controversy. and trying to play it safe like the old days and hoping the media will give you a fair shot was just naive. Like,
yeah, like the Apple thing you brought up, like that was like his most famous interview. People loved it. And that's when he was, you know, kind of just, you know, not trying to play the game. He was just being himself. And I think if he just did that a little bit more, but like getting into maybe, you know, a little bit more like why, or like who was like feeding him all these ideas? Like, why do you think he like didn't go on Rogan, like specifically?
I don't think
it was, if it was him.
Because my messaging, I've been trying to like signal to the conservative strategists, look, we need a better strategy at some level. And I've been invited to some fundraisers and some stuff at the National Club in Toronto where, you know, and I was able to talk to a couple of his handlers, so I won't mention their names. And I'm like, why isn't this guy on fucking Rogan? I know Rogan wants him there. And they just, it's why your advisors, whether it's in business, life, or anything, have to be great. He had establishment advisors who had been serving the conservative party for years. Right. And so they have an old playbook. And this was before Trudeau stepped down. They're like, we've got this election in the bag. All we have to do is not screw up like O'Toole did. Like, O'Toole announced that he was going to allow assault rifles a month before the election and lost the middle. Like, that was a dumb decision. Right. Like, you didn't gain one vote. Right? And you lose a few moms in the middle. Like, that was dumb. And so I think they were traumatized by that. So like, we're just not going to make a mistake because we got this in the bag. Trudeau is blowing it. And I'm like, you have to have a strategy. If you're going to be a change agent, you have to lean in, motivate people. And then talk to them more. He has an advisor by the name of Kelly who hates Rogan and Trump. And said, you won't go on there. You'll be associated with Trump. And she said, Rogan endorsed Trump, so you can't go on Rogan. And I'm like, since when did our society stop you from talking to people who disagree with you?
Plus Trump won.
Yeah.
It worked.
Like, it just made me want to like punch myself in the face or stick a fork in my eye. I'm like, but that's where I'm saying he allowed himself to be managed, so he didn't deserve to win. Like if he can't figure that out and he listens to an advisor who's put makeup on and Botox and contacts and trying to manage him, that you're not the leader we actually needed, even though we all desperately wanted him to be.
I didn't know that he had an advisor who told him, you know, don't go on Rogan because
he endorsed Trump.
That's
just because
wild.
He endorsed him, even though Rogan he speaks to millions and millions of Canadians who are disaffected people who don't generally vote.
Yeah.
And he lost the election by 1% of the popular vote. Imagine if he would have gone on there. I bet you he could have motivated 1 million Canadians to vote who wouldn't have voted otherwise.
How do you think Trump affected the election?
You know, Trump definitely mobilized Canadians who, it's ironic because Canadians have spent the last 10 years becoming weak. And then all of a sudden thought they were strong by saying, we're going to put our elbows up, like one of the most ludicrous things I've ever seen. But the one thing I think Canadians like more than anything is to feel morally superior to Americans.
Yeah.
And so Trump won, and they may have been okay with it, but there was a messaging. He attacked Canada because Trudeau was attacking Trump. Like right after Trump won the popular vote, Trudeau started slagging him when he was over in Europe with his buddies and criticized America for not electing a woman twice. That's what Trudeau did right after Trump won. And so if you attack Trump, Trump's going to hit back. And so he said, hey, you're a governor. You're like a tiny little guy. But the Liberals have amazing media strategists. They outperform the conservative strategists because they're not worried about the rules. They'll just do whatever it takes to win. And they just turn that into Trump wants to attack Canada, which he didn't. He just said, like, if you can't get your shit together and act like an adult and you're going to be weak, your people might as well join us because we're going to be great. Right. Yeah. But then it was turned into he wants to invade Canada. And then all of a sudden these people who have been weak for 10 years start saying, we're going to be elbows up like Mike Myers. You're a tough guy, Mike Myers. Like I like Austin Powers, but my 9-year-old nephew could probably beat you up. Like, you're not tough. You haven't done anything tough.
Yeah.
And we just forgot. We thought being Canadian, because we have a hockey team that can be tough, that the baristas at Starbucks are tough. Like we weren't tough, but it spoke to the Canadians who want to feel tough. Humans want, this. Yeah. Humans want to feel tough without doing hard things.
Yeah, really, for sure.
Like for the people that you interview, they've done hard things. That's how you become tough. But our whole society has become, you don't have to do hard things. You're just identify as anything you want, and we'll take care of you, and we'll apologize to you. And so we've created a whole society of people who don't do hard things but who say we're elbows up, and that swung it. And what Pierre missed is you have to have a strong counter narrative to that, right? And Pierre should have gone on Rogan or somewhere and said, hey, look, don't pay attention to the people in downtown where all the media is. Canadians are tough out here, but we also love America, right? And what we don't like is what Trudeau did to Canada. That would have been the counter narrative. But because the Conservatives failed on the counter narrative, Trump's kind of off the cuff comments gave the Liberal Party what they needed to turn the tide and get kind of soccer moms to vote for. And we should just talk about Carney. Like, where the hell did this guy come from? Like, I follow politics. Like, how about the irony of Trudeau criticizing Trump and the U.S. for not electing a woman? And then Chrystia Freeland is right there. And Trudeau steps down and somehow she just gets, like, I'm not saying
she's
I
the
like
worst.
Her. No,
she's the worst.
I can't understand what she says, but I'm just saying. And then all of a sudden this white guy just gets parachuted in from Europe and the World Economic Forum that nobody knows about. And there's not even a woman who runs against him or wins. Like, it's ironic that Trudeau is criticizing the U.S. for not electing a woman.
Yeah.
And then this white guy from the Bank of England, the Bank of Canada come in, and I think there's stuff going on. I'm not sure what it is, but
I do want to talk about Carney.
Yeah.
But just before we move on from Trump and the tariffs, like, what do you think, besides going on Rogan and doing, some of these podcasts, what do you think Pierre could have done in terms of just like his own response to like Trump in terms of like, I think that he should have just been, I don't want to say in the middle, but just saying like, I'm going to negotiate with Trump. I'm going to stand up for Canadians, but I'm also going to, not make America an enemy. I'm not going to, even though he's trying to, attack us to some degree, even though like that's his right to put on tariffs, which by the way, too, he said he was going to, introduce tariffs. He said that on the Rogan podcast before, so like we knew like this was coming. So he should have really had like a strategy long before this, like it wasn't like overnight he said, I'm going to put, the tariffs on. He knew this was coming. Like Pierre knew this was coming. So, what do you think he could have done to maybe, again, besides the podcast, just like address the nation into how he was going to handle Trump, how he was going to handle the tariffs, besides this, like, elbows up, I'm going to be tough on Trump kind of thing.
Yeah, because he kind of had to go against elbows up. But what does that mean? Like, yeah, if my company had been advising him, I'd say, let's come up with some other themes other than, illegal play in a hockey game, like elbowing somebody, right? It's not tough. Like one, they took reporters away from him. He didn't travel with reporters. So he's best when he's hammering reporters, but they took that away. And so he didn't get the play. He didn't get the controversy that makes people pay attention. So he was just talking, but the media wasn't really covering his just statements. So how does anybody hear what he's saying? So Rogan is kind of like the biggest symptomatic issue, but he needed to just be interacting with people, but being controversial, not playing safe. Like that was my Substack article, how playing not to lose is the best way to lose. Like, like whenever we watch a sports team that we love and they're up 2-0, and then all of a sudden they start playing defense or the last 2 minutes of a basketball game, like why does one side always kind of come back? It's because that's where the Liberals were. Trudeau, they were down, Trudeau was gone. Conservatives played defense. And
your best defense is strong offense.
And there was no offense. He could have spoken to Canadian themes, but to me, leadership requires courage. And it's hard with Trump because Trump is easy to hate when you're in political centers where the media is, like downtown Toronto or Ottawa or Vancouver. But those people don't care about lumber. They don't care. They don't care about dairy farmers. Like they've never been on a farm. They've never wielded an axe. Like, so they were just pretending to care about tariffs, right? So he had to kind of get right into, come up with strategies of how we could make Canada great again. And it still annoys me that I want to say that, but then every time I say it, I can hear people saying, oh my God, you're a fascist for saying a phrase like, we need to make Canada strong again.
That's insane. Like, of course you want to make, Canada great again. I mean, I've kind of, been thinking like, Robert Kennedy Jr. has obviously done a really good job with this, let's make America healthy again. Like this Maha movement, like, let's make Canada healthy again. And like, even if you said that, like, let's make Canada healthy again, which I don't know why anybody would not want to be on board with that. Yeah. Just because it's associated with Trump, people would be against that. which is completely insane, which shows that people are, brainwashed. Like they're not, like looking for or looking out for even their best interests. They're just looking for not to be associated
moral
with Trump.
superiority.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And that's why he had to go on. Like he needed to go into the battlefield of somebody who was talking nonsense and say, like, are you capable of critical thinking? Do you not think it's important for Canada to control its borders? Like, have people not looked at our cities? Like when I was in Pembroke, Ontario on this important trial, I went into a shop, and the downtown of Pembroke when I was in the military was like a cool, vibrant spot. And it was just dead. And it was just like, it was filled with walking zombies of fentanyl addicts. And it's kind of like that boiling frog thing. Nobody is talking about that 10, 15 years ago, our downtowns didn't look like that. And it's such a substantial change in our society, but nobody is talking about how our downtowns, and the guy there said, this is a small town. I've lost 300 customers who used to come here all the time to fentanyl. I've lost 300 in 10 years. And he goes, nobody seems to really care about it at the federal level because everybody's just pretending like we're great.
Yeah.
Right. And our cities are not great.
No, I mean, I can even say as someone who's from Newfoundland, I've been here since 2010. So basically about 15 years, like London has changed dramatically.
Oh, God.
I mean, it's crazy. And like, it's not even just like, the downtown core. I mean, you'll see panhandlers now, like all the way up in like the north end of London. Like it's crazy. There was none of that before. And people, for whatever reason, they just, put up with it. And that's sort of like the liberal attitude that a lot of these Canadians have.
No, it's like Canada is great because we're apologizing to everybody but white men for the sins of white men. That's what makes Canada great in their mind. Canada is great because we're supporting causes of everybody who declares himself as a victim. But greatness comes from doing hard things, right? Like anybody can issue an apology. A government can print money. But our society isn't addressing the fact, and it kills me because when you look at downtown Toronto, Calgary, London, Vancouver, like they all went liberal, but the cities are losing their wealth. People are moving out. Nobody wants to live in a place where there's tent encampments. And
like the safe supply thing, I think is ridiculous.
Oh,
and as you know, like London was actually the first place in Canada to have the safe supply. So if people don't know what the safe supply, basically what that is people who are addicted to opioids can now go in to a doctor and then just get an insane amount of opioid prescriptions in one day. Like there's one doctor, I won't say her name, in London, and she's prescribing like, I think it's 30 to 50 D8s per day. So dilaudid number 8s. So one dilaudid number 8 is equivalent to 5 Percocets. Like,
and
that's
how much
insane.
does she bill for that too? Like that's where they've made millions. Some pharmacists and doctors have quietly made millions behind shabby storefronts. Yeah. Right. But are billing like.
And I understand people are against, methadone, but if you do look at the research, like it does help reduce a lot of things that we're talking about. Like some people do actually get off of the drugs, and it does help with reduce crime and reduce violence. Again, it's not perfect. Obviously, you don't want to be on any drug at all, but like to shift from, methadone clinics to safe supply is just a disaster. And if you look at like the evidence, this is always a thing in, medicine, evidence-based care, evidence-based medicine. Like if you really look at that, methadone does help a lot more than, doing these safe supply programs. But yet, it's very compassionate and it's very, empathetic, basically to just give the person what they want. But all you're doing is, you're enabling them. And like you said, greatness and overcoming things comes from doing hard things. And yes, like coming off drugs is hard, but guess what? Millions and millions of people do it all the time. Yeah. Like everyone has met someone who was addicted to drugs, who's not addicted to drugs. Obviously, going through that is very difficult, but people do it all the time. And, that's the message that we should be putting out there.
Safe supply is just a prolonged death sentence. And that's why we don't have second and third order thinking in our society in terms of problem solving. I think RFK and Elon are engaging in it, but like the study, I'm familiar with the study you may have done, like in Vietnam, there was a lot of heroin use and heroin addicts, but they weren't as addicted when they came back because they were out of the environment.
Exactly.
So what you need is, we need to save people's lives by saying, once you're addicted to fentanyl, you are going to be apprehended for involuntary treatment, because no human gets off fentanyl by themselves. I don't think there's ever been a case of somebody who becomes a fentanyl addict and who can beat it by will. It's just too powerful. So you take them out of the cities where everybody is concentrated in their drug use, put them up north for 4 months, give them methadone, give them hard tasks, rebuild them, and help them relocate to other communities where they can kind of start fresh and get going. Like, that's the way to solve the problem, but nobody will even address it like that. But that goes back to, like, Canada at the moment is not great by any measure. Its only measure of greatness is its ability to beat up its history. Like, you know, it wins the Olympics of self-battery for, you know, even though it was the best country in the world in many places to live. And I think, you know, Pierre's team should have been walking through this downtown Calgary, gone on the bus, gone on that train system that costs hundreds of millions of bucks that just has people sleeping on there, terrifying passengers. Like, just got into the dirt. Like, he didn't get his hands dirty. The one thing about Trump, he's the hardest working politician ever. He's doing, you know.
Yeah, he is. Like, everyone says that about him.
And Pierre was curated. He was curated and managed, and his people got paid, and it was just, they should all get fired.
Yeah.
You know, but, and to what you're speaking about, like Danielle Smith going down, why does the premier of Alberta go to Mar-a-Lago? Like, as soon as Trump wins, if I'm Pierre Poilievre, I'm like, can I get a you know, an invite down there so I can be seen chatting with you as the president of the most powerful country in the world? But Trump hates Pierre because of the stuff he said. Like,
I'm just thinking about this now. I bet even if Trump, I bet what Rogan would agree to having Trump and Pierre on the podcast.
That would have been hilarious.
That would have been amazing. And maybe they could have worked something out, like, right there and
I bet
then.
you they would have liked each other if they actually talked, because they share views. But that's where life for me gets frustrating, because you can have intelligent solutions, but people like that don't get invited to the party because they put a moat around the leaders, and everybody's trying to protect their jobs. And so you can't get in and say, hey, Pierre, like, that's why I call them like worm tongues from the Lord of the Rings. Like, they're just whispering in his ear, hey, don't do that. Like, something's going to happen. Don't do that. That's bad. Oh, somebody's going to, like, get the fuck out there and win.
And I don't want to circle back to this again. So, like, I know that, you know, you said that there was someone in his ear, and clearly there was like this person who, you know, told him that, you know, don't be associated with Trump. But, like, when did that all happen? Like, because it doesn't seem, maybe I'm wrong, but, like, it doesn't seem like he was like that during his whole campaign. No. And so, like, what was the shift? Like, when did all that happen?
Because I started actually paying attention to him when he went out and walked with James Topp. You remember Warrant Officer James Topp? So that's a client of mine that, like, I helped out. And that guy is a Canadian hero. And
maybe you should explain who that is for people who don't know. Yeah.
Oh, God, it gives me shivers to remember. So Warrant Officer James Topp was a very highly trained and skilled and decorated combat soldier in the Canadian Forces. Just like the type of soldier that Canada had become famous for in World War I and II. And these people existed in large numbers in Canada in the 90s. But he took issue with the vaccine mandate. And that's a whole other thing. Like, I fought the federal government on that. They knew it was an illegal order, but Trudeau told them to do it anyhow because they wanted to use the military as an example for everybody else, and kicked out hundreds of precious resources that the Canadian military needed. And we can talk about the military later, how a disaster it is. So he protested the vaccine mandate, and he made the mistake of doing it in full uniform. And in our societies, you can't criticize the government in your uniform because our military has to be obedient, right? Because that's how coups happen. But he did it because he cared, right? He saw people weren't paying attention, and he had already had COVID. It's like, why do I need to get a vaccine if I already had COVID? And then when they got upset at him and they were going to charge him with it, he decided to walk across Canada. And the guy walked across Canada, and he's like, you're a Newfoundlander, but you actually remind me of some guys I know in the military. Like, there are some of those hardcore Newfoundlanders who can,
for sure,
they just don't feel pain the same way. And the man walked across Canada, and he didn't really do too much fanfare, but, like, people tracked him. The military let him walk across Canada, and nobody from the military, none of his bosses ever came out and said, are you okay? Like, do you need anything? But when he came into Ottawa after having walked all of that distance, I thought when Pierre went and walked in with him, like, I remember that, and I'm thinking, this politician's got some stones. Like, look at him, because this is dangerous. And I think James, way more than the trucker convoy, I think Warrant Officer James Topp is the reason vaccine mandates stopped in Canada. Because when he walked in at that time, It was 3 weeks later that the mandate stopped because it was just so stupid at the time. But Pierre, like, what? He didn't reach back out to that guy. Like, he seemed to want to distance himself from the people who supported him. And you know, he was invited on Patrick Bet-David. Clearly, he was invited on Theo Von. Clearly, his handlers told him no, just like Kamala Harris. I know Kamala Harris had one advisor, a young female who hadn't done much, who said, I hate Rogan. You can't go on Rogan unless we tell him every question he can ask. And Rogan's like, no. And so Sheila, like, I didn't want her to win, but she could have maybe over 2.5 hours, if she was good, got a bunch of people to change their vote. That's the danger of organizations, is that these handlers have other motives. And like Pierre, you know, I don't know what's going to happen. Maybe there'll be a non-confidence vote in the next year or so, and he can fire all of his handlers, which, you know, Pierre, if you're listening, fire them all right now. Go out into the world, hire Kevin O'Leary, hire Jordan Peterson, hire Dr. Mark Hart to be RFK Jr., hire me to be your strategic military advisor, and we will frickin' crush them.
Yeah.
We will crush them if he does that. But he's got to get rid of this ingrown, homegrown advisors that don't give him advice.
That's such a good point, though. I never even thought of that. Like, it was Trump's caucus, not just him, that won. Like, his caucus is unreal. Like,
amazing.
You know, bringing in RFK Jr., bringing in
Tulsi.
Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy,
Howard Lubnick. Most people don't know who Howard Lubnick is. That guy is a genius in business from New York City. Like, do you know Howard Lubnick? Have you heard?
I don't actually.
You should check him out if you want to see one of the coolest 2 hours. My favorite podcast, other than ours, I guess, is the All In podcast.
Okay,
and it's got like 4 billionaires who are self-made, and they don't owe anybody anything. And so they just talk pure shit about business and politics. But they were the first person to bring RFK in. They brought Vivek in. They brought in Trump in. They invited Biden multiple times. They invited Kamala in. But they went in and interviewed Howard Lubnick, who was Trump's transition manager. And he owned a firm in the World Trade Center that had 90% of its staff killed on 9/11. And he was just away. And he rebuilt it. But this guy was Trump's friend for 30 years. But if you search All In Podcast and Howard Lubnick, listening to this guy speak for 2 hours, he comes up with dynamic, asymmetric solutions to problems, right? And he said, like, I've been doing it in business for so long. That's why we made so much money. But nobody in government thinks like this. And that's why government is so useless. But just to talk about the caucus, like, that is a genius brain to bring in to solve problems. And think of it, Jordan Peterson could give great advice, mobilize people. He's going to make some people not like you, but when people listen to him, he makes a lot of sense.
I think he's fantastic.
Right? Kevin O'Leary, love to hate him,
fantastic,
but I love him, right? Like, you are on Rogan, like, you're into healthy, you're kind of RFK-ish, right? Like, you're educated, but you're talking sense. Like, I'd written an article a year ago about that. It got ignored, but I think, like, he gets hidden from that stuff. But now that you've lost and your own riding, fire all of those people, start building a team of top thinkers so that we can crush them, get you a majority, and then make Canada great again.
Yeah, I mean, Trump even said, like, in his first, time in his first term, that, like, he didn't really know, like, what to do in terms of his advisors, and he hired some of the wrong people
who didn't support him.
And then, this time around, he said that things were going to be different, and he did hire a completely different caucus. And I think that's, again, like, I'm not saying that he wouldn't have won without that caucus, but I think that really pushed him over the edge. Like,
well, look at them.
Like, RFK is, like, especially, and then I think Elon came in a little bit later, but still, I think that made a big difference. But Tulsi too, like, she's really popular in the States.
She's amazing.
Yeah,
but they get attacked because they're disruptors, right? One of the reasons the type of thinking that's needed to win that we don't have is Elon. He thinks in really interesting ways, and we should talk about Uber later as an example of it. But he just identified through analysis that the Amish never voted in America. And I don't know if you heard about this, but there are big populations of the Amish in New York, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Ohio.
How big populations? Just
like a significant chunk, but these states were the states that swung by margins of 1% to 2%, and they were like 3% to 4% of the population of the state, and nobody spoke to them because they all just ignored them. It's like backwards. They mounted a campaign to reach out to the Amish. Right. And you can see videos, if you look at it, of like their wagons with their horses, like giant lines of them coming up to vote for the first time, right? You need thinkers, not people who are just regurgitating ideological nonsense, and who haven't done it. So that's kind of, there's all these things that help, but like, how many of those people who supported Trump were past Democrats? It shows you that he's attracting people who aren't just Dallas versus the Packers. Like he's attacking, and in Canada we have that. You're the same, I'm the same.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Jillian Michaels was just on Joe Rogan, I think it was yesterday, and she said, like, right off the bat, like, you know, I wasn't the biggest fan of Trump initially because, like, you know, she's gay and that kind of thing. But she said, like, you know, when she, you know, went through the 4 years, like, she was like, oh, this is all kind of like bullshit. Like, nothing's really going to happen. Like, my marriage is fully protected. Like, it's all good. And so, you know, you do have to have that ability to, you know, swing the people from the left to the right. I mean, even though, you know, I don't really even like using those terms that much, and I don't really think I'm considered to be like right-winged per se, but like, it's just being able to, you know, swing people from, you know, whatever ideology they're thinking to, you know, a different way of critical thinking and a way that actually suits their own best interests.
No, he ignored that parents care about their kids. And I didn't hear him talk once about how, like, I've had some cases where in the kindergarten to grade 3 libraries of some public schools in Kitchener and Toronto and London, they've just subbed out Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory for books about gay sex. Like, I had cases where, why didn't anybody talk about that? Like, why aren't parents being, or any sex, not just gay sex, but I'm just saying, like, parents vote for their kids, you know, parents vote for, and they miss those themes. It was like, I understand carbon tax. I didn't know why it was just such a fixation on carbon tax. Like, I don't think that really spoke to Ontario the way it did to the West, but we need dynamic stuff in politics. And I don't think the PPC can do it. You know what I mean? Like, I think somebody has to take over the Conservative Party who is a populist.
Yeah, I think that, like, especially too, like what you just said about the kids, like, that's a huge issue, you know, and I think that really would have, you know, swung a lot of voters, because a lot of people are against that stuff, especially, like, you know, people who are religious in Canada, like, they don't want
immigrants too.
Yeah.
Like, you could have spoke to immigrants. Like, he should have been on. There's just a lot of shit going on there. But Trump, like him or not, is a force of nature. Like, I was having a discussion with somebody the other day saying, oh, Trump's a loser. I'm like, dude, he won the hardest job in the world twice. He ran, you might not like him, but he's won.
After being shot at.
Yeah. You know, and ran the most popular TV show, and, oh, he went bankrupt. I'm like, well, everybody who makes it goes bankrupt. Like, I don't agree with all of his decisions, but back then we didn't know about all of JFK's decisions. Like, he was in the basement smoking pot with Marilyn Monroe, cheating on his beautiful wife. Like, you know, we didn't know about that, you know, because media was different back then. But you need somebody who can lead you and defeat China.
And just on that point too, like, I don't really care what what they do in their personal life. You know, for me, it's just about, are their decisions going to influence my life for the better? Or are their decisions, political decisions, and are they going to influence my life for the worse? And so, you know, I do think that, unfortunately, you know, you may have to, like, play the game a little bit and to, you know, appear as you know, are a good person. And certainly don't, you know, advocating for, you know, infidelity or anything like that. But, like, at the same time, like, you shouldn't be focused on that. You should be focused on, you know, is this person going to do a good job, or is this person going to do a bad job? Like, if someone needs to operate on my brain for whatever reason, I just want the best damn surgeon. I don't really care what, you know, they do in their own personal life.
You want somebody who checks at least 9 of the 15 boxes on Canada's flag. Tells you, like, no, I'm joking, but it's also the morality, the way it's portrayed in the media. His morality is easy to attack because he's not part of the establishment. But nobody talks about how, if a senator makes $270,000 a year and they started as a senator being worth less than $1 million, how are they, after 12 years of being a senator, worth $500 million?
Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah. No, but I'm just saying, no, like, is it too much brain power to look into that? Like, how do you become worth $600 million on $270,000 a year when you started off not being rich? Like, there's morality issues there that are much more nefarious and hidden from us, because then we can just say, oh my God, look at him. And then everybody ignores the fact that they're making money on the backside. And that's why they're terrified of what Elon is doing with Dodge. He's going to reveal this stuff. And that whole, to change the whole establishment requires a force of nature, right? And it's going to make people upset, and there's going to be friction. And that's what I think is happening down there. And I don't know what's going to happen up here.
What do you think would have happened if Pierre had said, like, I want to create, a Doge for Canada?
Yeah.
Like, do you think, like, because it's so like crazy that I'm even asking that question, because you would think that everyone would be like, oh, that'd be amazing. Like, I pay so much money in taxes. I would really like to know where all the money's going. But then you have these people who are so ideologically captured that they'll be like, oh, he's just doing something that Trump and Trump's administration is doing, something that Elon's doing. So, I actually don't want to be associated with that in Canada.
Well,
do you think that people maybe would have, thought, okay, this is a good idea, we should go ahead and let this happen?
I don't think it's a linear this or that. I think you have to have a force of nature to convince people, right? And say, look, I know that some people are going to say this is what I'm doing, but here's an example of $250 million wasted on a project. Here's an example of this. Should the Canadian Forces spend $25 million to put maxi pads in every male bathroom on every base? Like, does that make sense? Like,
is that how much it was?
Yeah.
Holy shit. That's a
like,
lot of dough.
Dispensers, like, while the soldiers can't train, and you probably saw my post of me criticizing how fat the soldiers are.
Yeah. Well, isn't it, how many people can't even qualify to be in the military because of their physical stature? It's insane, isn't it?
Look, dude, up in NDHQ at Ottawa headquarters, our chief of defense staff, Jenny Kerrigan, calls us a field fighting force. We can't fight. We can't even deploy anything to the field. So she said, oh, we're not going to wear our dress uniforms up there. They're going to wear combat uniforms, which is more, it's more comfortable. You don't have to polish things, right? Like, but there's a triggering that happens apparently up in Ottawa from the soldiers, not the civilians, of wearing combats every day. So they've introduced casual Fridays, which is now being called flip-flop Fridays. So, this is our Canadian Army that can't get anybody to join because people don't want to join the military who don't want adventure, who don't want to believe in something, right? And it's one disaster after another. I don't know what I was talking about before that. Tell me flip-flop Fridays, I lose my mind.
Let's let's talk about the military, because we haven't brought it, although we do need to talk about Carney too, but let's talk about the military. Like, why do you think we are struggling so much? Like, is it just like from top down? Is it mostly just because, people are, in Canada don't really want to join the military? It's because we're literally like physically incapable? Like, is it a bunch of it? Like,
I got the answer, and really, like, words speak, data screams. The U.S., once they brought in Pete Hegseth, who a lot of the generals hated because he wasn't a bureaucratic general who believed in DEI and were trying to get promoted. He said, we're going to return to lethality. Our military is about killing the enemy. And, like, Canada back in the Harper days used to say warrior. In the Trudeau days, they banned saying warrior. Right? And
that's wild.
Like, think of it. So why it's an issue, I think, at a macro level is I think Trudeau and his cadre, when they got to power, were intent on attacking what they called toxic masculinity in society.
Which is wild.
And what are the two biggest centers of masculinity in Canada? The military and hockey. What are the two things that are being attacked? You know what I mean? In a lot of ways. And so the sexual assault scandals in the military, there was real. Like, I've represented lots of women who were sexually assaulted there, but I've also represented some generals who were wrongfully accused.
And I remember you won a big case with that.
Giant one, but that was the first one who pushed back.
Yeah, congratulations on that, by the way. I'm sure he was very, very pleased with that outcome.
We got a great book coming out that's going to just expose everything. It's amazing. Like, you're going to love that book. I should have him on your podcast because he was the third highest ranking general who got his knees cut off by the political people in the military. Nobody knows what happens in the deputy minister area. These people aren't elected. They're employees who are appointed by the ruling government, and they have disproportionate influence over the fighting soldiers. In fact, like, the chief of defense staff really works for a bureaucratic deputy minister, right? It doesn't, like, that person controls so much. It's crazy. But if you look at it, there was unfortunate timing because some of these scandals were coming up, and then you had a liberal apparatchik who wanted to destroy institutions of masculinity. And so as the scandal came up, rather than say, hey, the occurrence of sexual assault in the Canadian Armed Forces is actually the same as it is in Enron or in Ford, the Ford Motor Company. It's actually the same, right? But because it was a symbol of toxic masculinity, they just went at them, right? And so they used it to say, look, you don't represent Canada. You don't have enough women. You don't have enough trans people in. You don't have enough immigrants in there. So they just went after them. And what I've talked about is there were 5 to 6 combat generals and admirals who were amazing warriors who were removed from command over 6 years. And then the current CDS was underneath them all. But she was responsible for making sure the DEI stuff was going on, and she ended up becoming in charge. I don't think China could have done a better job of undermining Canada's military capability. And I don't even think it's beyond the pale to think, like, it takes 30 years to make a general who's a warrior, and it probably costs $50 million, 30 years. General Vance, who was there before, a good friend of mine, he was going to go to NATO after he was in charge of Canada. I'm not saying it happened, but it wouldn't cost much to pay somebody who worked with that person 30 years ago to say, hey, 30 years ago, he grabbed my ass and started talking about inappropriately to me. Under the framework we had, that person is fired immediately and can never come back.
Wow.
On an allegation alone. And then the Canadian Forces, trying to solve the problem, instituted a compensation model that they would pay anybody who brought up an allegation.
So just on allegation alone?
Oh my God, dude, And so
That's
all
insane.
6 of them on allegation alone, like, removed. Think of the resources to do that. And now think of who's left behind. A couple of these people have never even seen the business end of a rifle, in any type of theater. And now, but they're having lots of press conferences with rainbow flags and citing success, right? Like, if I was an enemy of Canada and wanted to destabilize our military, I couldn't have done a better job than what they did.
Well, all you have to do is just really implement that policy where you just have an allegation, then all of a sudden someone's gone.
China is involved in the Liberal government in some ways as well, right? Like, who knows? You can never discover that. But when you see them all removed, and then, like, to me, I'm concerned about that, right?
Yeah.
And now everybody who's left is very obedient and compliant, and is waving whatever flag they're told to wear. But when Canada is needed to show up, right? We don't have the capability. Nobody wants to talk about it. Like, it's like the homelessness or the fentanyl addicts. Nobody's talking about these real crises in our institutions.
Well, we were talking before the show about Dallas Alexander, who I had on my podcast, and he said, like, he doesn't even know what, like, the identity of, like, the Canadian Army is, because it is, if it is to be, like, lethal and to destroy, like, it's not that, he said. So you have to have some kind of, like, identity, some kind of messaging to get behind, other than let's just play nice and buy into these DEI ideas, and then the other thing though I want to mention, you said, like, toxic masculinity. So, like, how do you think, like, the military specifically is being, like, attacked with this, like, toxic masculinity term, besides, say, like, by removing this term warrior, which again is completely insane? I mean, that's even, like, used in, like, Buddhist cultures and things like that, where it's like you can be a peaceful warrior,
samurai. It's just focusing on everything but war fighting.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it's and as you were saying, Dallas was saying, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a great concept at one level, but in a merit-based society, it undermines it. Nowhere is merit more important. Like, when I was jumping out of planes, the only thing I cared about was whether or not my parachute was packed properly. Is whether or not the pilot was good, right? Is whether or not you know what I mean? Like, it was, and so the people who were around us in the better units, they were hodgepodge of misfits from around Canada, of any race, color, creed. Nobody cared who you were screwing. It was just like, do you have my back when the enemy is coming? That's what the military was at its best. And that's what we should have doubled down into. Inspired people who wanted to be part of that to join, but not make quotas to make some bureaucrat in Ottawa happy that there's enough brown in the picture. And nobody had the balls to say that. And if you're going to have somebody join your military and say, are you prepared to die for our country? The way you make that person into a warrior is you have to deconstruct their identity. That's what boot camp is. And you have to break the ego down and deconstruct the identity so that they can reform an identity that focuses on the group and the mission before the ego. that's a necessary element of a fighting force, right? Not everybody wants that. But if you're going to close with and destroy the enemy, you can't be thinking about, well, I did more than him last week, or I need a break right now, or I got a safe space card that I want to show, you know what I mean? The Taliban before, like, so the whole DEI construct is absolutely counter to a warrior culture that's necessary to close with and destroy the enemy. But it was imposed upon it to say, look, this is how we see the world. We're going to force your organization to be DEI. And then so now when I went on, now people have their own haircuts. They have long hair. They can color their hair. They have earrings and they don't have to have PT standards. So to allow people just to choose their identity is absolutely counter to the military, which says you have to put your identity behind the mission. But that conversation isn't happening, but it's so simple once you understand it.
And people would be proud to have that like identity of the military. Like, I'm in the military, I'm in good shape, I do hard things, I got, short hair, I make sure that like, my shoes are shined, all these kind of like classical things. And like, that would be like something that guys would be proud of, And now it's just like, you can't even have that like sort of attitude. You can just have this like laissez-faire attitude where you said, and I didn't even know some of these things you're talking about, that like you can have, earrings and long hair and all this kind of stuff. Like, I mean, that's, to me, that's just kind of
elbows up, buddy. We're elbows up. Like
it's insane.
But I wanted to ask you about testosterone, because I was thinking the other day, the way you said it, like, I think young men are really struggling. And what I was thinking, not being medically trained, but when I look at history, testosterone was very, very useful to the human race's success. Testosterone took, half of our species and said, we're prepared to take risks for the group. We'll go out and search for a new food source. We'll go kill animals. We'll fight off a tribe. And I think testosterone without hard things can become damaging to society. And so what I see in a lot of young men is that their body's still producing testosterone, maybe less because of plastics, but they produce testosterone, but that testosterone isn't being put into the cauldron of hard things, where that's when testosterone works. So if you kind of baby males, they just become angry couch surfers who are on Call of Duty, getting addicted to porn. And it actually ruins society to have weak men that have testosterone.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing there too is like, it's not just testosterone, there's DHT or dihydrotestosterone. And a lot of people are taking today like Propecia or finasteride and that kind of thing. And DHT is actually even more powerful for like having motivation, having drive and this kind of thing. And I think that there's, we know that testosterone is going down in men overall. And then also too, I think DHT is even taking like, a bigger decline. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that when men are, taking testosterone and they're not doing any hard things and they're just like, maybe they're going to the gym, maybe, and like building up their muscles, but then they're going home and just doing like, Call of Duty or like, like I said, going on porn, which is horrible, like just absolutely destroys your dopamine system, which is, your major reward system in the brain. Like these things can be, extremely detrimental. But again, not having testosterone, then you're sort of less likely to initiate, not as much likely to have that motivation. And then also too, even through just engaging in difficult things, you can increase your testosterone to DHT. And so that's when like you really get the powerful effects overall. So yeah, I mean, I think like you're spot on. Like if you take testosterone and you don't do hard things, you can just become this like angry, like lazy asshole who like thinks that like he knows better than other people, drives up your ego, like, because it can increase confidence in some ways. But if it increases your confidence overdoing like, these overdoing nothing, then you basically just become this like angry, overconfident, like super left, like liberal kind of leftist, right?
Who's not adding to society.
Exactly. You want someone who has testosterone, who's actually doing something, contributing to society, trying to make the world like a better place overall.
That's why I love Jordan Peterson's statement. And it seemed controversial, but so true. There is no value in being weak. You know what I mean? Like
there's no virtue in it. People think it's a virtue. Yeah.
No. Virtue is being strong enough to build or destroy things and using that power well. But for people who remain perpetually weak and then get celebrated, you know what I mean, by a DEI committee, it's not helping anything. I want to dive in a little bit into your medical on 2 points if I can, because I think it's interesting.
Sure.
First point, I think what's happening with porn, and I was telling my son this, is humans, it's very new for the human brain, the optic nerve, to be able to process so many images of women in sexual things, right? And in the old days, and I don't think this is really controversial, but one of the reasons why men worked is testosterone made you want to have a mate so you could screw.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
And so you couldn't get a mate if you couldn't build a house or bring home a deer. But what porn is doing, I think, is that these men are getting so much saturation of sexuality and they're orgasming watching it. I think it's sending a signal to their DNA that they mated.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And so, and then their DNA is like, done. Like we've made it, you know? And so it's also taking away from the drive to do great things, because they can go on Pornhub, see any number of beautiful women doing all of these things, ejaculate, and their body thinks, okay, I just made it.
Yeah.
And then the motivation is gone.
Yeah, because no, exactly what you just said. Like back in the day, if you wanted to see a girl naked, you had to put in some hard work in order to, you have to, you know, build a house, kill a deer, or you know, get a good job, make sure that, you know, you have your life in order, so to speak, so that you can attract someone who will take off their clothes for you. Yeah. But now you can just watch that online. Yeah. And then also too, like storage just like destroys like relationships to some degree, because like, yes, when you first meet someone, you know, a lot of times the first 3 to 6 months, maybe it goes on longer, you're ripping off each other's clothes, that kind of thing. But then you develop a relationship, you develop companionship, you develop, you know, things that you want to do with this other person. Like there's different phases in a relationship, and then people are just sort of getting stuck on that one particular phase. I think that this is a relationship, like porn is a relationship, and it's like, no, like that's not a relationship. You know, there's other things in a relationship. There's like companionship and, you know, going on trips together, having experiences together, even going through like adversity together. Going through adversity together with people sometimes is what, you know, really builds a relationship. Even something like,
you can't be
so
a brother
terrible
unless you've suffered together with somebody, like, you know what I mean? And
well, no one would know that better than you as someone in the military. But yeah, I mean, even sometimes like you hear people in a relationship where someone gets cancer and like, you know, something awful like that, but then they overcome it and they feel like that actually makes the relationship stronger. Or maybe, you know, the biggest one is probably, you know, having kids to some degree, you know? And so, you know, you overcome adversity and then you build that together, but people are just sort of thinking they're just getting in that like loop of like step one in this like dopamine rush. And it's like, there's more to it than that.
Junk food for the brain. Did you, you ever listen to Esther Perel?
Yes.
You should have, if she'd be on your podcast. I love the way that she talks about that. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, have you heard of Cuttlefish?
I haven't, but maybe you can explain it to me.
I'll tell you the story. I think you'll enjoy this as well. So this is what I think is happening with males at the moment. And it may be controversial, I don't care. But the cuttlefish is this fish in which there are actually 2 types of males in cuttlefish. There are males that are born that develop into alphas that fight to control 5 to 6 female cuttlefish. And then there are males that are born that are highly feminized. They look like female cuttlefish. And they both have a genetic survivability benefit. So the alphas fight, and an alpha will take over and have 5 females in there. But what will happen is the beta males will come into that and be misidentified by the alpha male as a female. And so the beta male swims with the females, and then when the alpha goes out to fight another alpha cuttlefish or fight, he bangs the females and leaves. And so then the male is there, right? But think of it in society. There's all these guys who really don't believe half of the shit that's going on, but they're just betas hanging around with females, and they know by Friday the females are just bored out of their mind, and they're like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, I'll copulate with you.
Yeah.
Like, I just think that's a fascinating thing of it. We're kind of from a DNA perspective, almost rewarding betas to hang around with some angry females, and they're able to replicate their genes by not being alphas because society is so safe.
Yeah. I mean, you even have guys now who are like proud feminists, which is like so odd. Like, you know, when I was growing up, and I mean, I'm only 40 years old, there was no such thing as like a proud like male feminists, you know, and like, I understand, you know, women fighting for, you know, the rights and that kind of thing. But like, it's so odd for like men to just be like so much on like their side. Like you'll be like, you know, when Hillary was running, like on with her, you know, this kind of thing. And it's just like, it's fine if you want to, you know, again, I wasn't, you know, for a lot of Hillary's policies, but, you know, it's fine if you want to vote for her, but vote for her because of her policies, not because you want to look good and because you want to, you know, be seen as this male who's like progressive and who's identifying with like, you know, with like a female. And even just on that note, not to get off topic, but even like if you look at some of like Hillary's old like videos, like her stuff on like immigration and stuff, like, you know, if people watch them, they wouldn't believe it. She'd just be like, you know, if you're here,
round them up.
Yeah, you like round them up. Like you got to make sure that you're working. You know, if not, send them out. Like that's what her attitude was. I even think Obama was like super against like gays and stuff back in the day. Yeah,
and he wasn't for homosexual marriage in his first term.
Yeah,
but you know, like you can be a male who advocates for empowered females, because being a strong male means that you're comfortable with a powerful female. But in today's society, females have as much or more rights than Canadian males, right? So to be a feminist today is different than to be a feminist, you know, 20 or 30 years ago, where you supported, you know, better opportunity for them to get in the workforce. Today, there's way more females in universities. There's way more promotions for females in government agencies and other agencies. So
more university educated, I believe, almost like 2 to 1.
Yeah, it's not a good place for males at the moment growing up, and they're just moving away from society. And that's why, to get back to Pierre, they're listening to some of these podcasts, and if you don't engage with them in a healthy way, I think they go down a darker path towards kind of the Andrew Tates, which is, you know, you need to get them before they kind of go down there and think that being a male is being a sexist prick who treats women like garbage, right? It's being a male is making your bed, doing hard things, you know, and wanting to build a family. It's this fucking fascinating thing, but it's a mating strategy to be a cuttlefish. And whenever I see kind of these beta males today who are like just joining whatever protest without really understanding it, I just think that guy really doesn't care. He's just trying to get laid.
Yeah, it's just kind of like, I've seen that meme, like, you know, I'm with the current thing, you know, like I support the current thing, and like
that's where the chicks are.
Yeah, and it seems like that's, you know, what's going on. And like, yeah, like coming back to someone like Andrew Tate, like he wouldn't have been popular 20 years ago. Like people just would have thought, oh, like this guy's like a douchebag kind of thing. But the thing is like, because, you know, there's so much of this like incel like culture going on, and because there's such this like attack on masculinity, like, and you know, Jordan talked about this recently on Rogan, like, and you know, why, you know, Andrew is so popular, and it's just because like, well, it's better to be, say, where he is than be like at very, you know, at the bottom and being like an incel, right? But you know, obviously what you want to do is be someone who's like can really contribute, like in benefit society, like you know, to be someone who, you know, takes other people's money. Like I think one of his big businesses was like, you know, trying to lure guys like beta male types to, you know, give money to like OnlyFans women kind of thing. You know, like I'm not going to feel good, you know, at the end of the day, you know, if I did something like that. I'm going to feel better if I, you know, saw some patients that I know that, you know, they were sick and now, you know, they're getting better, or like, you know, for yourself, like someone who, you know, was like wrongfully accused of something, and then like you know, help that person, like that general you're talking about. Like you want to do something that's like beneficial and contribute, have some meaning overall.
That's why doctors and lawyers are not enjoying their lives as much either, is because they're making money just by being part of the system, but they're just moving product, and they don't care. And so there's not the same meaning. A surgeon who saves somebody, yes, but yeah, that's why I think RFK's stuff is so groundbreaking. That he's actually trying to make it's almost too stupid to talk about. You know what I mean? Like how much it makes sense to like, let's encourage people to be healthy. Like, you know, the whole, what Jillian was talking about yesterday about, you know, the scam of fat shaming.
Yeah.
You know,
I didn't listen to the whole podcast. Maybe you can tell me about that.
No, she was just talking about how she was being canceled because she said, no, it's not okay to tell people it's okay to be fat, right? Like you don't do it in a mean way. But if you care about them and you want them to survive, you can't say that it's healthy. Like Camille went on the Skinny Confidential, my partner in the branding company, and that episode went viral when she ripped apart Lululemon kind of like what Jillian Michaels is doing, just saying like your running ambassador is an obese Black woman. Like on their poster, Lululemon's running ambassador was like not chunky, like not big boned, but obese.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And she described that she runs ultra marathons. And we're just like, just from a medical perspective, this is not true, right? And there are so many inspiring female runners from all communities. You could have picked somebody as a running ambassador rather than pretend that somebody who's grossly obese is running 10K a day.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's just genetics that she's keeping it. Like, you know what I mean? Like we're so disassociated from real data because everybody is so busy virtue signaling themselves to death that our society is crumbling.
Like when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Stallone. So I like was obsessed with the Rocky movies and all that kind of stuff. And like, you know, that's the kind of hero or that's a person that you want to look up to. Like, I don't know who would be the real female, you know, version of that or who it was back then or who it is now. But like, you know, that's what you want to have, someone like that. Someone, and like, even in like the Rocky story, like he always has a hard time at first, you know? I mean, you know, I don't want to give away the first movie, but okay, I guess it will. Spoiler: he does lose in the first one. And you know, in Rocky 3, you know, he loses that first fight against Clubber Lang. You know, and in Rocky 4, you know, Apollo gets killed by the Russian. You know, and so he always overcomes adversity. Like that's like the hero. And obviously he has like, you know, an incredible, you know, physique, and you know, that's what like inspires like young people to, you know, be better and to be in better shape and to have that kind of hero character overall. And you know, we're losing that.
Did you see
society.
the Minister of Health in the US under Biden?
Yeah.
Like that fat trans person.
Yeah, it was wild.
It was almost like it was a cartoon. Like if you were to make it up and say this is gonna be in a movie, they're gonna go, no, it's not believable. There's no way your country, the most powerful country in the world, is gonna have a Minister of Health that's not healthy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and so RFK, at least he's like fit. You know, at least he cares. Like, you know, you might not agree with everything he says, but, you know, making sure our kids get good food when they're young, getting corporations out of the dyes, the additives, the hormones. Like, why can't people get behind that?
Yeah. I mean, why can't people get behind, like I said, like, you know, make Canada healthy again? Like everyone should be able to get behind that slogan. But you know what? We still haven't touched on Carney. We should definitely, touch on that. So what did he do that made Canadians vote for him? I guess that's kind of, you know, the big question. Like, what was it that he did so special?
He didn't do anything. He just showed up. And then the media and the liberal strategists just enmitified Trump and Poilievre and put them in the same thing. And then he just went out and just talked vanilla, right? But like nobody seemed to ask, where did this guy come from? Why is he here? Has he run for politics before? He was Trudeau's economic advisor. That was the best part of Pierre's campaign, is during the debate, where he said, you're on the website as Trump's economic advisor. Trudeau's economic advisor, right? You're responsible for this, right? But he wasn't able to get traction because who watches the debate? Boomers, maybe, but they weren't going to switch because they hated Trump more than that. So he was just a nice, safe place for, you know, Canadian boomers who are in coffee shops to say, well, he's not Trump, so we're going to vote for him. And his connections to Europe and the World Economic Forum are disturbing. I think he is part of
globalists.
A global. I know that word is weird to me. I don't want to ever sound like that, but I think that there are people who are moving money, keeping the populace distracted, right? But we have Canada, who has a tremendous amount of energy, and he's super fixated on being carbon neutral at all levels. And if the US is embracing an aggressive energy policy and the Canadian provinces are told to sit on it, you know, and not be able to grow, that's why I think the danger of separation is not Quebec anymore. I think it's Alberta and Saskatchewan. And if we don't see a change, I think they're going to leave because they're not going to fund Quebec while not being allowed to exploit their energy resources.
And so with Carney, like we know that he just showed up. Like, do you think there's anything that he did like particularly effective in his campaign, or do you think it was just because almost literally he looks like a politician? You know, he looks like a guy who is a politician. And I don't know if that's what, you know, really attracted the baby boomers. I don't know if it's the way that he, you know, speaks, like, you know, like, or is it certain policies that he has? But like, you know, a lot of us anyway have seen that graph of like, you know, basically, you know, for people who are watching, it's more or less like, you know, the conservatives are here, the liberals are here, and then all of a sudden there's just like a switch.
Yeah.
Right. And so like, you know, What strategy do you think, if any, he employed to do that? Or was it just like because he replaced Trudeau? Like people maybe were fed up with Trudeau, but they were still liberals, and that's all what took.
Yeah.
So basically, maybe it wasn't necessarily Mark Carney. Maybe it was just that they had someone to replace Justin Trudeau, and maybe that was it.
But you didn't say anything from a policy perspective that inspired me. The fact that he was the economic advisor for Trudeau should have been a big hole. Even in the leadership, the campaign for the Liberal Party, like you didn't really hear anything interesting in terms of divergent opinions. Like Chrystia Freeland, had her Tourette's, whatever she was doing. Like it just seems really odd to me how it happened. And I don't know anything behind it, but it really seems like he was inserted, like Kamala was inserted. This is who we want to be there. For Kamala, it was because they wanted a female minority in the presidency for their reason. And I think from a Canadian perspective, there are certain people who wanted somebody who was connected to the economics of Europe and Canada to keep certain policies going. And he was funded, and he just, because he didn't speak well. When you hear him speak, he's not convincing or charming.
No, he's very average.
He's just very average. But you'll see CTV saying, "Oh, a highly respected economist," to which I would say, who is the economic advisor to Trudeau during the worst period of economic growth in Canada's history. But CTV didn't say that, right? Like nobody's talking about Canada's immigration and what happened over the last years in terms of bringing people in who are voting Liberal. Nobody's talking about fentanyl. Like I saw a story on CTV. Oh, the fentanyl is exaggerated because there was only like 600 grams seized at the border.
He said that they were not in a crisis.
Yeah, but that's bad data because the only stuff seized, when the border is wide open, nobody's going through the checkpoint.
Yeah.
Right? So the fact that it was only seized there just shows you that it was going through in truckloads where there was no control over the border.
Yeah.
So we don't have a thinking populace right now. We have a media that is encouraging infantilism, right? To keep the status quo. And it's I've been doing a couple of clips on the hockey trial here in London. Every time I do a clip with the media, the reporter's like, "Man, that's the best stuff I've ever heard. This perspective is really interesting." And then later I hear, "Oh, producers decided to cut it because it was a little too controversial." Right. And it doesn't so what you don't want controversy on big issues. You just want to repeat pablum to people. It's an unfortunate time.
Tell me more about the hockey stuff. I
just these five guys, I almost got one of those guys. Right. But the agents have their connections,
and
there's, I think there's some exchanges between who they hire in some cases, but
this is one with Cole McCarr and okay. Yeah.
So they're all charged. They were in the World Juniors. They won the gold. They were in London. They're on a golf tournament. They're having a good time. They go to Jack's, right? And they're popular people who are all going to be multi-millionaires. There's a certain segment of the population, female population, who worships hockey players, who finds them incredibly attractive, especially if they're going to become multi-millionaires.
100%.
The one guy brings a girl back. The other guys come back from the bar. They start partying. And they film her, because they're talking about having sex amongst numerous individuals, which happens in humanity. You have to be able to admit it. This happens in humanity. And people do dumb things when they're drunk. But they actually filmed her and saying, "Do you consent?" There's a video of her saying, "Yes, I consent." Right? So that's what you kind of tell guys now. If people say, "Hey, if you're worried, how do I protect myself from a wrongful allegation?" We'll record the person saying, "I consent." They did it. They had sex the next day. This is just from some reports, she's kind of upset in the morning. Her mom sees it and her mom makes some calls. The police investigate and say, "Look, looks like there was consent." There was text between her and the original guy saying, "Hey, just tell the truth. There's no problem. Just tell the truth." And the police investigate it. Maybe they did a good job. Some people think they did a horrible job, but they said there's not a crime here. And then there's a lawsuit where they sue Hockey Canada for not caring about women, and Hockey Canada settles, which I think was a nice thing for them to do. They didn't have to.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets into the hands of some advocates who then call for a reopening of the investigation because toxic masculinity resulted in this, right? Not drunk femininity that wanted to have a good time when she was drunk and maybe regretted it the next day.
That's probably what happened.
Well, that's what I said, but nobody can talk about it. I'm we can't say that this could be something somebody wanted and then regretted. It's not just that all men are bad and that Hockey Canada is bad. They might have mishandled how they report it, but they paid off the woman where they didn't have to. She sued, they paid her off, she took a settlement. And now you have London's chief of police falling all over himself, apologizing, as opposed to, I'd love to speak to the first investigator, who was probably a good cop, who said, "There's nothing here. I'm not going to ruin people's lives." As soon as they got charged, they all lost their contracts. They all got
wild.
fired, right? And there's a video of her saying, I consent. And the Crown's opening statement says, this is a case about her not saying I don't consent. It's about her being forced to not consent. Which, wrap your head around that. If you have a son or somebody who went to university, I've got probably 10 cases of guys in university who get charged in third year for having sex in Frosh Week, that they're told by somebody that they couldn't have consented because they were too drunk. Not that they were passed out, that they were just too drunk. But the guy was hammered too. Everybody was hammered. Like it's a dangerous time. Our society wants to pronounce judgment rather than think critically.
Like I'd say 95% of people listening to this had at least one sexual encounter that they regretted in their life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's just,
drunk as hell.
Yeah.
And you're trying to piece together the evening.
Yeah. And so it's, again, I don't know, obviously nearly as much about the case as you do, but like I can say that much. And, and especially if you're getting in something that, most people would think the next day probably is a little bit gross and, would, really regret it than say if it was just one individual, I could see that happening. So, I really hope the truth comes out, whatever it is. And
we want to protect females.
Happens.
Like I have 3 daughters. Like I hold rapists accountable too in my practice and used to put them in jail. But there has to be a balance in which we just don't assume all men are bad and all women are good, because on the spectrum of 1,000 males and 1,000 females, there's going to be a certain amount of males who are monsters. There's going to be a certain amount of males who routinely sexually harass people. And there's going to be people who are on the gray line. Then there's going to be amazing people. If you have 1,000 females, you could ask yourself, how many of them would lie on their taxes? Maybe a big chunk. How many of them would lie to their spouse about going out and having an affair? Another chunk. How many would lie for $200,000 of tax-free money? How many?
A lot.
And so if they do, where does that go? Into the courts, right? And so and they do a disservice to the true victims. But you have to acknowledge that there's a segment of the population that will lie for money, for tax-free money, and it is destroying a lot of people's lives because our system doesn't want to be critical about it anymore because it wants to fall over itself to be seen as helping victims. And when they say like the military's policy. Like when Danny Fortin was found not guilty, the current CDS briefed all of the generals, she wasn't the CDS at the time, and said, our policy is, regardless of the conviction, that we believe all victims. And if you say that phrase, that means that people are guilty.
Guilty until proven innocent.
Even if they're found not guilty, they're still guilty because we believe all victims. But if you say victims, it means they're already the victim of a crime.
Yeah.
So how can that be your policy?
And it also too, even if they win, like it puts a bad light on them. Like, these people will always be the guys who were involved in that incident that got away with it.
But that's what it'll be seen. But like, yeah, and they're going to be $500,000 in legal fees. They lost their contracts, right? Like it's a very, I think society's pendulum has swung way too far one way, and we need to get back to being smart, critical thinkers.
Yeah. I think, that goes also for, the Canadian election that we were, talking about earlier. Like, obviously, people aren't thinking critically. And, a lot of the times, especially lately, like, you always hear this over and over, but it's true. And it's like, it's not that like a lot of the people who are considered now to be, right-winged have become more right-winged. It's just that the left has gone so far that many people who were, maybe center left, you could say, are now just considered to be right because so many people have swung so far to the left.
Because
so
all
you're
the
seeing that in so many things.
All the conservatives we know, they support gay marriage, right? Like that never used to be in the conservative side, in Democrats or the Republicans in the 80s. Right. But like, I don't really know many. There's a few people on the extreme who say that it shouldn't be the same, but most of it. So you're absolutely right about where it's moving. And I think society is amplifying crazier beliefs to keep people more distracted from really what's going on with the money and what's going on with our society. And the boomers have let us down and the media is broken. CBC should be shut down.
What did you think of at the debate, Rebel News kind of being kicked away or not being like addressed? Like,
again, it's distasteful and disgusting. Like like, I don't like everything that they do, let's say, but I think they've actually, they started maybe at the extreme, now they're just asking questions a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And it's almost like they want to control the questions. Like, they don't want to have the questions, but like, let them ask questions. Like, nobody is turning away the most liberal news agency.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So why are they getting turned away? Like, why does that reporter keep getting arrested for not doing anything, and they all keep getting thrown out? Like, it's
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see, like, I understand someone identifying as like, maybe on the right, but like, I don't really see them as being like antagonizing. Like, I think they're just asking, like you said, questions. Like, I don't think that they're doing anything that is, I'm not really sure or how CBC really phrased it as, why they, chose not to, or why they didn't think that they should be asking questions. But like, it seems like there's no real reason for them not to ask questions other than just that they don't like them.
They're not controlled by the corporate media. So they're not controllable. And what we need in media is less university elites who think that their job is to pronounce and tell the masses what to think. We need to get cops to become journalists. We need to get investigators who will do, like in the old days, a beat journalist was like they worked their butt off to dig for truth, right? Who's digging for truth these days? Like, who's asking tough questions? Like, it's just Rebel News, I think maybe could do things a little bit differently, but at least they're asking questions, and our politicians need to be asked tough questions.
What do you think they could do to maybe shift the mind of CBC to make them see more legitimate? And I'm not saying that like,
no, I don't
that they need to, but like, what do you think would make them be seen as a legitimate media?
This comes from my branding and marketing company and working with Camille. The Fox News, Rupert Murdoch was a genius of branding, right? So they had an angle to the news, but they were branded beautifully, right? They hired beautiful women, right? They knew what the audience was. Conservatives in Canada are like your uncle who doesn't know how to dress, who wears like a white tie with a black shirt. You know what I mean? Like, it's just horrifically branded. And they get overconfident because they're consumed with their message, but they don't understand that you still have to present yourself in a way that makes people want to come there, right? And so it's horrifically branded. I think that's it. It looks gross. I don't think it's got enough funding from certain people in the right way. And they become in love. Conservatives are also guilty of speaking just in their bubble, right? And not going out there. And it's what I was saying in the trucker convoy.
But sorry, just one thing on that though. I do find though that like liberals too, like they won't go on conservative platforms, or they won't talk to anyone who, isn't a liberal as well. Like, I found, like, for my podcast anyway, like, it's very easy for me to get someone who is, considered to be on the right side to come on. And I try to get, some people from the left to come on, and they just won't do it. Like, they don't want to come on. They don't want to be, associated with anyone who's had, some kind of, I've had like Candace Malcolm and like Andrew Lawton and some people like that on my show. And, I just don't know why, like, they won't chat with someone who wants to chat with both sides. So I do think both are a little bit guilty of that, but I actually would think that conservatives are a little bit even better than the liberals overall. But in terms of, coming on to another person's podcast,
they are for that. What I'm saying is they don't know how to brand, and they promote only from their own tribe. The thing about the liberals is the Liberal Party's advisors are mercenaries. They're not liberals. They're just the best at what they do. The conservatives kind of want to say, oh, well, we got to hire somebody from rural Saskatchewan to be in you know what I mean? And unfortunately, you're not getting the best gene pool all the time, right? Like I told the trucker convoy when I was trying to help them, you raised a bunch of money, buy one of the liberal media advisors for $500,000, bring them over to your team. They're like, no, we got our own one from Winnipeg. I'm like, you're going to lose. Like so that's why I think, but you're absolutely right on in terms of dialogue. It's because they'll get their ass cleaned.
Yeah.
It's just it. And it's like, it's unfortunate because having been a liberal all my life, like I like the exchange of ideas, but the conservatives will exchange ideas with you. They will bring the other side on, but most of the liberals don't want to do it because that's where I think Jordan kind of hits it in the socialism thing. And I never cared too much, but the whole socialism is like controlling the ideas, is to control the narratives. You can't say that you're not allowed to question that, right? Like, and you would have anybody on your podcast who could say or question anything and say, okay, let's bounce this around.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to have conversations on the other side because they're so tied emotionally to the beliefs that if you say anything, because I have a Cybertruck, now I'm a fascist, even though I was a member of the Green Party, right? But now I have people calling me fascist because I have a Cybertruck, which, by the way, is the coolest car I've ever had.
And I hope it doesn't get spray painted or anything like that.
I'm getting it wrapped army green, like the color of his shirt there next week, just to kind of go with the brand.
I think they look dope.
You should drive one. Like, it is the best car I've ever driven. It may be interesting to your audience. The self-driving is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, it will drive right through a neighborhood. It sees every pedestrian on the street. It will stop at a stop sign, let the pedestrian go, and then make a right turn, and it'll drive you right into your driveway. Like, I've had it drive 3 hours from Toronto, downtown Toronto, right into my driveway in London, and I didn't have to correct it. Now, you have to ask yourself how, and this is why it's important to have second and third order thinking, not linear thinking. Elon Musk is a freaking genius. So he looked at Uber, and you'll notice that, especially in the States, there's a disproportionate amount of Model Y and Model 3 Teslas as Ubers. Think of it. He realized that I'm going to give away my cars at cost so that I could have full-time drivers 12 hours a day with the 27 sensors gathering data. So for the last 7 years, he's subsidized Uber drivers so he could get trillions of bits of data to make the best self-driving software in the world. Like, that's the type of thinking that's missing in Canada when you only bring politicians in who haven't done great things.
And you must be able to get work done though too. Well,
no, this is what's annoying about it. In the old Tesla, you could hang like a water bottle on it, and if you're on the highway, it would just drive because it only had a hand sensor. But it has a camera now inside, which is amazing because you could always look in your car. You know what I mean? But the camera inside is so good that if your head turns, like even if you look at the screen too much, it gives you a warning. It senses if you have a phone in your hand.
Okay.
Right? And so if you get 3 warnings, it turns off auto driving. It's kind of frustrating because they have to do it for liability, because the auto driving is so good is that I could easily kind of like read something and it'd be so safe because it's got spaceship technology on there. But everybody who owns it is like, fuck, this thing is such a good driver, but I'm on my phone way less because the camera beeps if I go on my phone. So it's good for society, but he's a villain because he's trying to stop waste and make electric cars. Like, so I'm a fascist because I have that car. Like, go fucking figure.
That's wild. And I think even still today, like I don't know the exact stats, but like from people age of like 18 to maybe it's 35 or 40, something like that. Like the number one cause of mortality of death was car accidents. So if there's some way where they could like reduce that, and again, like I'm not for like control, and I think that even if that is implemented, like I would like the ability to just be able to drive my own car, that kind of thing. But I mean, it's amazing if that could just like completely eliminate or significantly reduce the amount of accidents that people are having.
It's a whole other topic. It's like, why do you have a speed limit and then have cars that can go double it? Like if you're a rule follower, why is there a speed limit and then cars can go triple it? There's an interesting kind of disconnect between society. Like if you want to reduce deaths, you just make it so that there's photo radar or cars can't go faster than the speed limit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like it's
ridiculous.
Just an odd thing, but instead you have cops driving around making a subjective decision to pull you over if you're 16 over or 10 over, and then they can come at, like, it's just a weird societal thing. But
it's like you can go, people usually say, you can go 120 on the highway. That's usually the cutoff most people, will say, which is, I guess 10 to 20 over, depending on which highway you're on. But, if you go over that, then, you can get pulled over, which is, again, completely discretionary.
Yeah. Like it doesn't really make sense, but I love my grandfather's a race car driver. Like that Tesla is faster than a Porsche, that pickup. Like it drives so beautifully, like in terms of, and it's got all-wheel steering. Okay. So it, you can do a full turn just with a little tilt of the steering wheel because all wheels turn. How
is it in the winter? Wicked?
It's amazing. Well, that's amazing. The first Teslas weren't that good, but obviously we don't need to talk about Teslas too much more. But
how long have you had it?
This one, just a month and a half. Okay. But it's amazing. I love when little kids get so excited and scream. And then a mother whose name might be Karen or Jennifer, I'm not just saying all Karens are the same, pulls them away saying, don't talk to that person. And their kid's like, that's amazing. Can I see the Tesla? And they're like, kids love it. But apparently people who don't do hard things hate it.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, the person who spray paints your car is going to be in for a rough ride.
Well, it's also an idiot finder because it has so many cameras, right? Like all these people who got busted doing it, they all getting big jail sentences. Like, so it's from an insurance, they don't get stolen either. Like, I don't know why anybody's buying a Range Rover these days. Didn't you used to have one?
I did, yeah, but I don't now.
They're getting stolen. Like one car is getting stolen every 5 seconds in Canada and nobody's doing anything about it. Especially Range Rover, but you can't steal a Tesla because they always know where it is.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and you can actually call Tesla if your car is being stolen and they can shut your car down.
That's insane.
Right. So, like from an insurance perspective, as opposed to what's going on with the break and enters in Toronto to steal. Have you seen some of those videos? Yeah,
that's pretty wild. And I remember too, the cops saying like, what did he say about something about like, just leave your fob out front or something. And it's just, so that way they won't get into your house. And it's like, what? Like, I want to be able to, live in a neighborhood, or I want to be able to live in Canada and not have my car stolen, and certainly not be able to just leave like my keys out front.
They're not telling people this, but from talking to some cops, and I think we're doing a horrible job, but what they'll do is they'll go to a high-end shopping center, see a Range Rover that is new and they want, and they'll just put a transponder under it.
Oh, okay. Like an air tag or something like that. Yeah.
And then they'll know where it's parked, and then they'll do a couple drive-bys, right? And then it'll be there, and that's how they're finding you. Like, so like, I don't understand why we can't do more on that, but it's been a great conversation, my friend. Anything else we should do to wrap up?
Just let people know where they can know more about you, maybe. Where we both are.
On TikTok is where I get the most traction.
Okay. Cool.
Which is hilarious because I find the TikTok algorithm is the best at getting your message in front of people who are hungry for it.
All right.
Instagram and some of the other ones are more of a challenge. But I'm at Rogue Lawyer, and you can find videos there where I piss off the majority of the population in one way or another, but I enjoy it. And, I have a law firm. You can find that at millarslaw.com. And
what kind of law do you do, and where is it all over? Can anyone from Canada contact you?
Basically? I get contacted from all over from Canada, but I personally only take a select few cases these days, the ones that I think matter to Canadians, and I help veterans when I can who have big cases, but we do personal injury. I love representing victims of sexual assault. Like I love to take on rapists and hold them accountable. Like I've sued the Catholic Church a number of times for like priests raping boys and that kind of stuff. But I think I'm one of the few guys who represents both sides of this aisle. If you come to me and say you're innocent, like I'll take the case because I know what liars are like. But if somebody has really been raped, then I'll just destroy your rapist. And
beautiful.
That's what gives me sauce these days.
Cool. And everyone at Dr. Mike Hart on basically all platforms. So
Canada's RFK right here. Hopefully you're going to be the Minister of Health in the next election.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Good man.
All right. Thank you so much for doing this, Phil. It's great.